26.33, traffic calming, Prince Edward Drive North between Dundas Street West and Bloor Street West. We have a number of speakers.
Thank you for your attention.
You have 5 minutes.
Mom, you're paranoid. Mom, relax. Nothing's going to happen. These are the words I heard from my kids regularly as I tried to teach them to be pedestrians and drivers in this city. Well, something happened. We moved into our home on Prince Edward Drive 25 years ago. I've seen a lot of change, but the rebuilding of the street in front of my house and massive condo developments are the biggest changes. We had legal on-street parking until 1998. After this traffic calming measure was removed and the street was narrowed, in my view, speeding got worse. Now the cars at the top of my block, just south of the church at the Kingsway, stop at the stop sign and look south. They see a free, open, smooth, straight road in front of them. They see the twinkle of streetlights at Bloor Street in the distance and zoom from the intersection at great speed. Zoom, zoom, thousands of times a day. We are a residential collector road. Homes and churches. The most unique problem we have is our sidewalk. The west side of our block is the only part of Prince Edward that has no grass or trees to separate the sidewalk from the zooming cars. The sidewalk slopes at every driveway. It is narrow to begin with, but you combine churches, nursery schools, an elementary school, and summer camps with pedestrians and zooming cars, and no white lines painted along the sidewalk, and well, it isn't good. Add to the mix a sidewalk often covered in green, blue, black bins, brown bags, snow, ice, and leaves, and the sidewalk becomes even more unsafe. I have seen, for example, tiny children break free from their adults and have cringing close calls. Pets have been hit. Teens do wheelies on their bikes on this slopey, skinny sidewalk, not to mention the pedestrians who walk distracted. We have no stop signs at King George's. But we do have a fork in the road that encourages fast turns onto King George's. Frequent collisions at King George's go unreported because people are afraid of insurance companies. Just last Thursday, there was an enormous collision there. So what happened that stopped my kids from dismissing my concerns? Well, they saw me on the 6 o'clock news last year. There I was in shock behind the reporter as she described yet another pedestrian killed by a car near the LCBO at Wendover and Bloor, just 2 blocks from my house. A 94-year-old woman full of life and vigor was killed. I will spare you the details of what I saw as I tried to help her, of what haunts me. I will not judge who was at fault here, the driver or the pedestrian, but it is interesting to note that shortly afterwards, heavy white lines were painted on the street in an attempt to make things safer. This is classic prevention. When I was a young woman, I worked for many years as a public health nurse for this very city. My job was to teach prevention and promote health. Prevention and health promotion are cornerstones of an entire department in this city. An army of employees in the health department are trying to make our city safer and healthier. So you can imagine how delighted I was to hear about Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a program recently adopted by our city that focuses on defining traffic deaths as preventable, and that the design of the transportation system must improve. Quote, "We have to design a system for people instead of asking people to adjust to an imperfect system." It calls on the system designers to take more responsibility and make safety improvements in design of how roads are constructed, as well as demanding that users of those roads act responsibly. Public participation is central to Vision Zero, and so here we are. Earlier this year, I petitioned my neighbors on both sides of the street between the Kingsway and King George's. Overwhelmingly, people are very concerned about the speeding. Older neighbors are afraid to cross the street. Young mothers are afraid for their children walking to school. People afraid when exiting their driveways. People afraid of the health effects of the constant noise, the trucks, the illegal trucks, and their exhaust. I'm sure you've heard it all. Police with no resources to ticket the abusers. Please help us. The 2016 Traffic Calming Guide for Toronto outlines dozens of ways Vision Zero can be applied. We need speed humps. I will quote the Globe and Mail editorial page from only 3 days ago. Our car-centric cities and suburbs too easily become killing fields for those navigating them, especially the elderly. If you want to save lives, slow down the vehicles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, you have a question? Councillor Campbell?
So I reside in the area, and I was there not long after that lady was struck at Wendover and Bloor, and I don't know how you can possibly equate the two incidents between your road and what happened there.
I wasn't equating the incidents. I'm simply pointing out the benefits of prevention. And as Vision Zero...
what does prevention have to do with a lady crossing a road at a stop sign and cars traveling mostly within the speed limit on Prince Edward? How are the two related?
The two are related because we want to prevent people walking. We want to prevent pedestrians from getting hit by cars. And by painting white lines on the street, we created a more safe intersection where maybe that incident would have happened. On Prince Edward, we have nothing. We don't have any white lines. We don't have enough stop signs. We don't have a reduced speed. We don't have speed bumps. We have people walking along a street where cars are constantly zooming, and there's no grassy boulevard. There's nothing.
I know the street very well.
Yeah, so the equation is we want to prevent something from happening on Prince Edward, as maybe it could have been prevented when those white lines were painted at Wendover.
You say cars are zooming.
Yes.
The staff study that was done doesn't corroborate that.
Yes, it does. It does. Did you look at this?
I mean, the staff report.
Yes.
So I would welcome your comment. The staff report says that 78% of the cars are traveling at 50 kilometers an hour or more slowly.
It also says that thousands of cars are going over the maximum posted speed limit, which is 40. So if you add 3,900 and 1,300, that's thousands. Thousands of cars are going over the posted maximum speed limit, which is 40. So actually a very small percentage are going the posted speed limit, the proper limit.
But the 85th percent is still, it's 53 kilometers an hour. But zooming.
53 is 13 over the speed limit.
I guess it depends how you define zooming along.
Well, when you live right off the corner, and people are zooming, come visit me. I'll show you what zooming means.
Cares what you might show up. I don't know. Careful what you wish for. Councillor Ciano, the question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Lydia, for coming out. I know I've received lots of phone calls about King George's and Prince Edward and accidents and the need for a stop sign there. Did you say that there was another one last week?
Yes, I believe it was on Thursday, and I actually stopped my car to talk to the lady. It just happened, and she said she was going to call the police. It was a big one.
Right. Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Nunziata, had a question?
Yeah, just a question. You mentioned that at one point, and I don't remember that, there was parking on Prince Edward?
Yes, in 1998, and I remember this because the road was renovated the year I had my second child, and I was trying to sleep, and I couldn't sleep. The road was narrowed, and when I bought my house, we had on-street parking on my side, on the west side, so there was a barrier between the traffic and people walking. The barrier was the parked cars.
Okay, so...
And then it was taken away.
Yeah, okay, it was taken away. I don't know for what reason, 1998, but has there been any thought of maybe bringing that back in? Bringing the parking back in and then asking the city to paint the lines that you're asking for?
Well, I think if they brought the parking back, they would have to move the pavement more to the east side to have the same width the road, because they actually narrowed the road and then took away the parking. So they'd have to rebuild the whole road.
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, that's a possibility, and as well as painting the lines, that's a possibility. And you don't need to have speed humps to have traffic calming. There's other ways of having traffic calming. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, well, we asked for white lines and we asked for a reduction in speed, but somehow we got here. So, speed bumps, if that's what would be most effective, that's what the staff, I believe, supports, then I support that too.
Thank you.
I did distribute, sorry, they're already timing me. I submitted in advance of this meeting a 2-page document opposing the proposed speed humps on Prince Edward Drive North with this color-coded map providing the context of other neighborhood streets and of the locations of the neighborhood fire and ambulance services. And I'd appreciate it if you'd refer to this map now. I do have more copies if that overhead is hard to see, if anybody would like to look at one. Prince Edward Drive North is 9 blocks long. It's colored pink on the map. It's a city-designated collector street running through the Kingsway neighborhood between Bloor at the south, Dundas at the north. At present, it has 4 speed humps on 2 blocks at its northern end between Queen Anne and Government Road because of the location there of Lambton Kingsway School. It's a school calming measure. Speeding problems have been occurring, as you've heard, on Prince Edward on blocks south of Queen Anne between Bloor and Queen Anne. But, therefore, to support new speed humps would, I think, be a huge mistake. Anti-speeding measures on Prince Edward Drive are certainly needed, but some other than speed humps. Nothing else has yet been tried. First, speed humps divert traffic, as confirmed in the city's own traffic calming policy. Traffic has to go somewhere. If it's discouraged on one street, it turns to other streets. If more speed humps are installed on the collector, Prince Edward Drive North, they will divert traffic speeding problems onto the Kingsway and onto neighborhood non-collector streets. A number of these streets, which are colored green on the map, would provide drivers with non-humped routes through the neighborhood. Risks of traffic speeding accidents, including pedestrian injuries and deaths, would simply be shifted from Prince Edward Drive North to these other streets, some of which do not even have continuous sidewalks. The city's traffic calming policy states that traffic calming measures should be community-based and not transfer volume and speeding concerns from one street to adjacent ones. And I think the city staff report gets by this problem without paying enough attention to it. Second, and even more importantly, the proposed speed humps would slow emergency vehicle response times throughout the Kingsway area because Prince Edward Drive North is the most direct, straight, fastest access route for both Toronto Fire and Toronto Paramedic Services into the whole Kingsway neighborhood, between Bloor to the south, Dundas at the north, Royal York Road to the west, which are all in red on the map, and Kingsway Crescent to the east. This is an area of 40 to 50 square blocks. The neighborhood's fire station is on Prince Edward Drive South. It's down there at the bottom of the map, just below Bloor. The ambulance station is on the south side of Dundas, just west of Prince Edward Drive North, and it's near the top of the map. You can see the situation clearly. Speed humps slow emergency vehicle response times. It's a fact, and the more humps, the slower the response times. In a 911 emergency, even seconds can make the difference between life and death. More speed humps all along Prince Edward Drive North, in addition to the 4 existing at the school, would seriously reduce the response times of emergency vehicles to 911 situations throughout the whole neighborhood. Both Toronto Fire and the Paramedic Services have written letters opposing the new speed humps. Given these clear letters, the city staff's report on speed humps should have been, I believe, a negative recommendation. Perhaps the staff didn't understand the neighborhood geography, including where those fire and ambulance stations are located. Fire and safety risks should be given more weight than the meeting of technical warrants. The proposed speed humps present very real fire and medical risks to the whole Kingsway neighborhood. A final problem, also related to emergency vehicle response times, is what I'll call speed hump creep. Diversion of traffic and speeding from Prince Edward Drive North onto other neighborhood streets would inevitably lead to these streets also petitioning for speed humps, which, if installed, would further slow emergency response times. Residents, when they're signing traffic petitions, don't normally think about fires and medical emergencies. Several neighborhood streets other than Prince Edward Drive have already recently petitioned for traffic calming. They haven't yet met the technical warrants, but they soon will if traffic is diverted onto them from Prince Edward, and we will have a neighborhood obstacle course. The proposal for new speed humps on Prince Edward should be rejected, and other kinds of traffic calming measures, certainly needed, should be considered. My 2-page document, which I submitted, gives some examples of possibilities. All residents of the neighborhood are directly adversely affected by this speed humps proposal. The proposal does not affect just the residents of Prince Edward Drive North, as the staff report and its polling recommendation suggests. So, in short, traffic calming, yes. Speed humps, no.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much for coming home over here. Thank you very much for coming today, and thank you for your presentation. We found it when we arrived, seems like hours ago this morning. So from your map, you're showing that there's an ambulance station on Dundas.
Right.
And would Prince Edward Drive be one of its main routes to get down into the community right now?
That is its main route. It's on the south side of Dundas, so it turns right onto Dundas, doesn't have to cross the traffic, and then right onto Prince Edward Drive. The only other ways it has of getting into the neighborhood, if it wants to go west, it has to go through that involved loop interchange at Royal York Road. If it goes east, there's a very short street, which is in green on the map, that goes down to Government Road, and then there's Kingsway Crescent right over at the very edge of the area. So except for that one short green street, basically the ambulance is going to have to go to either the western edge or the eastern edge of the neighborhood in order to get into the area.
And right now, I actually used to use this street quite a lot when I used to have to go to Mastermind for birthday presents every birthday party my kids went to. There's the speed humps and the 30K by Lambton Kingsway School, right?
Yes.
And it's also some south by the park, am I not mistaken?
Yes, the speed humps extend past the school to the south for two reasons. One, the park is there, but mainly because there's a hill from Queen Anne down to the school. And if drivers don't slow down before they get down to that area of the school, it may be too late for them to stop. So the speed humps stop them as they're coming down the hill.
Would you think it's more, it's sensible to maybe reduce the whole of Prince Edward Street from Bloor up to Dundas to 30K? Because then resident drivers don't have to think, what speed am I in right now, rather than hitting a speed hump.
I think that's one.
It should all be 30K.
I think that's one of the things that could be tried. What dismays me is that nothing else has been tried yet. And I know it's frustrated the residents because they've asked for certain measures and have been impeded in one way or another, so they're getting fed up. But I think that these things could certainly be tried, and could be tried much faster than putting in speed humps.
And from your map here, the Kingsway, because I usually come across Bloor, up the Kingsway, then turn right onto Prince Edward when I'm getting to Dundas. To be honest, if you put in more speed humps, I'd just stay on the Kingsway and keep going right through there.
That's
is that
right.
what your concern is, that it will...
That is certainly one of the streets. I think that's probably the first street that we get diversion. And the Kingsway did request 12 speed humps about 10 years ago, and was persuaded by a group of residents put together by the councillor's office to look at the whole neighborhood in terms of what was happening. They were persuaded to go in for other measures, and so 2 speed humps at the very beginning and at the very end to signal that this is a residential area, and then some plantings, some repavings in certain areas, a change to the entrance to the Kingsway. And I think that the first place that traffic is going to be diverted from Prince Edward, if there are speed humps on Prince Edward, is it's going to go on to Kingsway. But I think it's also going to go on to probably some of these other streets that I've drawn in green on the map. There are a lot of other streets in the neighborhood. I've just put the green in to show the ones where traffic is likely to go if they find they're frustrated by speed humps on Prince Edward.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions.
And we've been there almost 10 years. And almost from day one that we moved there, I thought we probably made a mistake because all you see is cars just flying back and forth up and down the road. I've seen drag races right in front of my house. I've seen motorcycles Sunday night coming back from the weekend, just flying up and down Prince Edward. Council mentioned that the average speed was found to be about 53 kilometers when it's posted 40. That's approximately 33% over the speed limit, and that's quite high in a residential area. If we did 133 kilometers on the highway, I think you'd be immediately pulled over for speeding on any major highway. So I've actually had my own incident there. About 2 years ago, I was in my driveway and I looked both ways. I was backing out, but I did look both ways, and I gave myself sufficient time to back out. Before I knew it, a car speeding from Bloor came around behind me and actually tried to get around me on the oncoming lane, and I actually clipped his back corner. So he must have been, I don't know how fast he would have been going, but I was backing out and he tried to go around me, and I clipped his back, the back of his vehicle, and believe I was held responsible for that because I hit his vehicle, even though he was trying to go around me on the oncoming traffic lane. So I think one of the big problems are the blue lights are seen from Prince Edward about 1.5 blocks to 2 blocks away, and when they see a green light up at Bloor Street, they're just thinking about getting through that green light, and they're speeding and they're going fast. There are a lot of kids in the neighborhood. I have 2 kids myself, and we have many, many traffic accidents at that intersection on a monthly basis happening there. So there is a problem. I think that speed bumps are part of the solution, but I think, as Councillor has mentioned earlier, reducing the speed to 30 kilometers an hour would also help. And I think Mayor Tory also mentioned that there may be some speed photography happening in the near future in Toronto as well. I think that would be a solution as well, but that's too long to wait for. But there is a major problem on Prince Edward, and the lights on Bloor Street, I think, are what attracts the speed because they just want to make it through the light.
Thank you, Terry. You had a question by Councillor Nunziata?
Yeah, actually, you answered it, that would you support reducing the speed limit to 30 and see what happens, and then do a study at that point?
I would love to see the speed report reduced down to 30, but I think there has to be somebody or something watching that speed, because we know that posting a speed limit without anybody monitoring it.
Well, it would have to be enforced, yes. Yes.
Been there for over 30 years, and the question I have is related to the speed, because speed and noise are part of the same problem. But I concur with the earlier speakers. The speed of cars coming north of Bloor Street is sometimes incredibly far above 40. And I agree again with those coming south who want to hit that green light. But I know that the one problem that I'd like to bring up, which is not exactly on subject, is the noise of those cars. And sometimes there are cars and small trucks, motorcycles, without mufflers at all. Or if they have, they're deliberately designed to make noise. And they can make an incredible racket at 40. But you know when you hear them much higher that their speed is also very much higher. Sometimes I can hear them at 1:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and if they're going along Bloor Street, I can hear them as far as the South Kingsway. They make that much racket. And why there is no enforcement of the legislation that must exist to curtail that kind of activity, I have no idea. And I wonder if this subject has come up for discussion before, and if anything can be done about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a motion to put up on the screen. And the motion will read that Etobicoke-York Community Council received the report October 20th, 2017 from the Director of Transportation Services, Etobicoke-York District for information. And number 2, request the Director of Transportation Services, Etobicoke-York District to investigate an all-way stop at King George's Road and Prince Edward Drive North. You know, oftentimes with traffic calming, it's a no-win scenario for residents in the community, and we're faced with making this very difficult decision. I can tell you that as part of this process, once we listened to the concerns of those that lived on Prince Edward, we wanted to see and hear from the residents in the adjoining streets. We actually hand-delivered flyers to all the streets coming off of King George's. There is not to underestimate, a lot of opposition to slowing down King George's, or sorry, slowing down Prince Edward. The main issue I have after reviewing the report and hearing from our emergency services is what 8 additional humps is going to do to EMS that exist on the north of this quadrant and fire who exist on the south. And I took that further than just reading the letters. I actually spoke with 2 captains from Toronto Fire who say it seriously impedes bigger vehicles a lot more than it impedes smaller vehicles from getting across, the damage that it does to these vehicles, and it's certainly not helpful. And given that that's the main arterial for 2 of our EMS stations, I ultimately thought that we need to continue to study this issue because it's important. We need to slow cars down, but we don't want to exacerbate the problem for others in the community with speeding on their streets. But loud and clear we've heard, and I think we heard it from the residents today, that you see basically a racetrack, a drag strip, because you see those lights at Bloor. So I'm hoping that and of course all the phone calls I've gotten, we heard from Lydia today with respect to another accident last week at this intersection. So hope that we can support looking at this right away. I will also be asking staff through this review, you know, if it makes sense. I know staff don't like roundabouts. I've heard it loud and clear many times over. But if it's something we can look at here where it really slows down traffic so that they don't have the opportunity to use Prince Edward as a drag strip, we'll be working on that as well within this review. So I'm hoping everyone can support the motion I put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Ciano. Seeing Councillor Campbell, you speak?
Sure, I'm gonna support the motion. I know the area well. I think that an all-way stop is in order there. A roundabout would be far better, but you know, we all love roundabouts, some of us do anyway. But I think that's an excellent move. And just as a point of information, I had 2 streets in a very similar situation recently where we did polling for traffic calming. Both were warranted. And when it went to a vote among the people on the street, in one case there was not enough support for the traffic calming, and the traffic calming wasn't even speed humps. It was chicanes, which are a little less intrusive. And so on Summit Crest, the polling results were not high enough, and on La Rose, they outright voted against it. So stop signs are one measure by which cars absolutely have to come down and come to a stop sign, and I have no doubt in my mind that one there will be warranted.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor, a question to the mover, Councillor Holiday, Deputy Mayor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair Grimes. I guess my question to Councillor Ciano, if you would consider it a friendly amendment that in number 2, the Director of Transportation Services investigate said roundabout or other measure in that intersection that may improve it.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up with them, so I would consider that a friendly amendment, Councillor.
Got that, Rosemary? Councillor Mammal, do you think I'd forget you?
No, I don't think you would.
Councillor Mammal,
I think you dream about me.
I do.
Yeah. Look, you know, I'm not a fan of I'm going to support the motions, but I'm not a fan of stop signs because I don't think they work. I think most people assume that others are paying attention when at stop signs, and there are more accidents around stop signs than anything else. I've been here long enough to know that. So I'll let Councillor Ciano kind of go through his process, try and get them, you know, if it meets the warrants for lights, then that's what you should have at that corner, in my opinion. If it meets it, if it's something that you can do, it's better than a stop sign. Stop signs, in my opinion, don't work. I'll support your motion anyway. But roundabouts, we should have roundabouts everywhere in the city of Toronto, in my opinion. Roundabouts keep traffic moving, and they stop traffic, and they stop speeders, and it's just a wonderful way of doing our job without putting lights in and without going crazy. People do, at the end of the day, support the roundabouts. I remember putting a roundabout in Councillor Nunziata's area when I represented it a number of years ago before she did. And before we put the roundabout in, everybody was having accidents on that intersection. They were going through, they were smashing through fences and front porches, and it was crazy. The tractor trailers that were cutting through in that particular community was crazy. So it was very controversial at the time, but it ended up doing the trick. No speeders, no tractor trailers, all because of a simple, small, little island that seems to work. So I don't know why we're not putting more. Councillor Ciano, put one in. You'll probably get all of us supporting that if you want to do that tomorrow. Tractor trailers are only a good thing on the highway, and even then, there's accidents.
Everything moves by truck. Thank you, Councillor Mamalidi. Motion's on the screen by Councillor Ciano. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Clause amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.